The most dangerous thing in the universe? A human with nothing left to lose. HFY Sci-Fi story. Before we dive in, drop a quick hi in the comments. It may seem small, but trust me, it really helps YouTube share this story with more sci-fi fans like us. I'd love to see who's watching. The plasma conduits hummed with familiar malice as Kale Voss pressed his scarred palm against the biometric scanner. The red light flickered twice before turning green, and the reinforced door slid open with a mechanical whisper. Beyond lay the observation deck of mining station Xerion 7, a hollow sphere of metal and desperation floating in the asteroid belt between Ganymede and Ceres. Kale stepped inside, his boots echoing against the steel grating. The vast viewport dominated the far wall, offering a panoramic view of the void, where twisted chunks of rock drifted like the bones of dead giants. Each asteroid carried the scars of industrial extraction, deep wounds where automated mining drones had carved out precious metals for 3 decades. He wasn't alone. Standing near the viewport, hands clasped behind his back, was Director Thane Korath. The man's silhouette was sharp against the starfield, his expensive suit a stark contrast to the utilitarian grimness of the station. Korath didn't turn when Kale entered, but his reflection in the reinforced glass revealed a thin smile. "Beautiful, isn't it?" Korath said, his voice carrying the practiced warmth of a corporate executive. 30 years of human ingenuity carved into rock and ice. Your father would have been proud. Kale's jaw tightened. He moved closer, stopping just beyond arm's reach. My father died in one of your tunnels when the support beams collapsed. Pride had nothing to do with it. Korath finally turned, his pale eyes studying Kale with clinical interest. He was younger than expected, maybe 45, with the kind of surgical precision to his features that money could buy. Accidents happen in dangerous work, Mr. Voss. Your father understood the risks when he signed his contract. A contract that didn't mention the structural violations your inspectors ignored, Kale replied. His voice was steady, controlled. Funny how those reports only surfaced after the memorial service. The smile on Korath's face never wavered. You requested this meeting, not me. What is it you want? Kale reached into his jacket and withdrew a slim data pad. The screen glowed softly as he placed it on the nearest console. I want to show you something. Maintenance logs from Section C7, dating back 18 months. Fascinating reading. Korath glanced at the pad, but didn't move to pick it up. I'm sure our maintenance teams are thorough. They are, Kale agreed. Thorough enough to document every warning about metal fatigue in the primary support structure. Thorough enough to file 3 separate recommendations for immediate repairs, all denied due to budget constraints. The director's expression didn't change, but something shifted behind his eyes. Even if that were true, it wouldn't change anything. Your father's death was classified as an industrial accident. The matter is closed. Is it? Kale stepped closer. Because I've been thinking about that word you used. Accident. It implies something unexpected, unforeseeable. But when you know the beams are failing and you choose not to fix them, that's not an accident anymore. That's murder. Korath laughed, a sound like grinding metal. You're emotional, Mr. Voss. I understand that. Grief can cloud judgment. But accusations like that require proof, and proof requires more than maintenance logs and wishful thinking. You're right, Kale said quietly. He touched another control on the data pad. Which is why I brought friends. The door behind them hissed open. 3 figures entered the observation deck, moving with the practiced silence of people accustomed to dangerous work. The first was Zara Thorne, her engineering jumpsuit stained with coolant fluid and her cybernetic left arm gleaming under the overhead lights. Behind her came Pike Donnelly, a demolitions expert whose massive frame barely fit through the doorway, and Nix Castellanos, small and sharp-eyed, her fingers dancing across a handheld scanner. Korath's composure finally cracked. "What is this?" "This," Kale said, "is what happens when you corner people who have nothing left to lose." Zara stepped forward, her cybernetic arm whirring softly as she accessed the central console. "Station lockdown initiated," she announced. "All external communications are jammed, and the docking bay is sealed. Security personnel have been, temporarily, incapacitated." "You're making a mistake," Korath said, his voice rising. "This station is owned by Hegemony Mining Consortium. I have connections that reach all the way to Earth Central Command. You can't just—" "Can't what?" Pike interrupted, his voice a low rumble. "Can't demand accountability for our friends who died in your tunnels. Can't ask why you value profits over human lives." Nix looked up from her scanner. "I'm reading 47 heat signatures throughout the station. Most are in the residential sections, probably asleep. Security team is unconscious in the armory. Nice work with the sleep gas, by the way." "Thank you," Zara said absently, still working at the console. "I've always been good with chemistry." Korath backed away from the group, his eyes darting toward the door. "You're terrorists. That's what this is. Corporate terrorism." "No," Kale said, following him step by step. "We're workers. Miners, engineers, technicians. People your company has been killing slowly for 3 decades. The only difference is that we've finally decided to kill you back." The director's back hit the viewport. Behind him, asteroids tumbled slowly through the void, their surfaces scarred by human ambition. "What do you want?" he whispered. Kale smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "I want you to understand something about humans, Director. We're not the strongest species in the galaxy. We're not the smartest, or the fastest, or the most advanced. But we have one quality that makes us uniquely dangerous." He leaned closer, close enough that Korath could see the flecks of gold in his brown eyes. "When you take everything from us, we become willing to take everything from you." Zara's voice cut through the tension. "I'm into the main system. Station records, personnel files, financial transactions. It's all here. Kale, you need to see this." The datapad in Kale's hand chimed softly. He glanced down at the scrolling text, his expression growing darker with each line. Interesting. It seems Section C7 wasn't the only area with structural problems. Sections B12, D3, and F18 all have similar issues, all marked for deferred maintenance. That's normal cost management," Korath stammered. "You can't repair everything at once." "No, but you can evacuate dangerous areas," Pike said, his massive hands clenched into fists. "Instead, you kept people working in death traps. How many more accidents are you planning, Director?" Nix looked up from her scanner again. "Kale, I'm picking up something else. There's a ship approaching from the outer marker. Corporate registry. Heavy escort configuration." "How long?" Kale asked. 20 minutes, maybe less." Korath's fear transformed into smug satisfaction. "You didn't think I'd come here without backup, did you? That's a Hegemony security vessel. Military-grade weapons, trained soldiers. You're finished." "Maybe," Kale admitted. "But you know what? I'm okay with that." He turned to his companions. "Zara, can you access the mining charges in the lower levels?" Her cybernetic fingers danced across the interface. "Already done. 47 high-yield plasma charges currently set for asteroid braking. I can reprogram them for structural demolition." "Pike," the big man grunted, "give me 5 minutes to reach the reactor core. I can rig a feedback loop that'll turn this whole station into a very expensive firework. Nix, communication array is already compromised. Even if they try to negotiate, we control all channels." Korath stared at them in disbelief. "You're insane. You'll kill everyone on this station. Innocent people." "Innocent." Kale's voice was soft, dangerous. Like my father was innocent? Like the 43 other workers who've died in your accidents over the past 5 years? He gestured toward the viewport, where the approaching security ship was now visible as a distant point of light. You want to know the real difference between humans and other species, Director. Other species know when to quit. They understand when the cost becomes too high, when the risk outweighs the reward. Kale stepped closer to Korath, who pressed himself harder against the cold metal and glass. But humans? We're stubborn, vindictive. When you push us past our breaking point, we don't just break, we explode, and we take everyone around us down with us. The communication panel crackled to life. A crisp, authoritative voice filled the observation deck. Mining Station Xerion 7. This is Captain Torres of the HMC Retribution. We are aware of the hostile situation aboard your facility. You have 10 minutes to release Director Korath and surrender yourselves for processing. Zara looked at Kale. Response? Kale picked up the communication handset. When he spoke, his voice was calm, almost conversational. Captain Torres, this is Kale Voss. I'm assuming Director Korath has briefed you on the situation. Mr. Voss, you are in violation of numerous corporate and federal statutes. Release the Director immediately, and we may be able to negotiate reduced sentences. That's very generous, Captain, but I'm afraid we're past the negotiation stage. Kale glanced at his companions. Pike had moved to the central console, his thick fingers working with surprising delicacy as he accessed the reactor controls. Nix was monitoring security feeds from throughout the station. Zara continued her work on the mining charges, her cybernetic arm interfacing directly with the station's systems. Captain, Kale continued, I want you to understand something. The 4 of us in this room, we've all lost people to this company's negligence. Fathers, brothers, friends, people who trusted Hegemony Mining to provide safe working conditions and fair compensation. Static crackled over the comm. Mr. Voss, I sympathize with your grievances, but this is not the way to seek justice. Justice. Kale laughed, the sound echoing off the curved walls. Captain, justice would be a fair trial, honest investigators, and corporate executives held accountable for their crimes. What we're offering is revenge. He looked directly at Korath, whose face had gone pale. Director, would you like to explain to the good captain how many safety violations you've covered up? How many inspection reports you've buried? How many workers you've killed to maintain your profit margins? Korath's mouth opened and closed soundlessly. Sweat beaded on his forehead despite the station's climate control. I thought not, Kale said. He keyed the comm again. Captain Torres, I'm transmitting a data package to your ship. Financial records, safety reports, internal memos, everything we've uncovered about Hegemony Mining's operations in this sector. Zara nodded and tapped her console. Transmission complete. The comm was silent for nearly a minute. When Captain Torres spoke again, her voice was strained. Mr. Voss, even if these allegations are true, you cannot take the law into your own hands. Why not? Pike growled, not looking up from the reactor controls. The law hasn't done much for us so far. Kale raised a hand for silence. Captain, let me ask you something. How many of your crew came from working-class families? How many of them have parents or siblings in industrial jobs? Another pause. That's not relevant to this situation. Isn't it? Because I'm betting at least half of them understand exactly why we're here. They know what it's like to watch their loved ones break their backs for companies that see them as expendable. Nix looked up from her scanner. Kale, I'm reading elevated stress patterns throughout their ship. Crew's getting agitated. Good, Kale said. He turned back to the comm. Captain, you have a choice to make. You can storm this station, try to save one corporate executive at the cost of dozens of innocent workers. Or you can let us finish what we started. And what exactly did you start, Mr. Voss? Kale looked around the observation deck. His companions continued their work with grim determination. Pike's massive frame was hunched over the reactor controls, sweat dripping onto the console. Zara's cybernetic arms sparked occasionally as she interfaced with increasingly complex systems. Nyx monitored multiple feeds simultaneously, her sharp eyes tracking security patterns and environmental readings. "We started the reckoning," Kale said quietly. "For 30 years, hegemony mining has treated human lives as acceptable losses. Well, today they're going to learn that humans can be losses too, the kind that cost everything." He gestured toward Korath, who stood pressed against the viewport like a trapped animal. "Director, would you like to address your employees? The people whose deaths you've authorized through negligence and greed?" Korath shook his head violently. "I never authorized anyone's death. Accidents happen in dangerous industries. It's unavoidable." "Unavoidable," Kale repeated. "Like the structural failures you knew about but chose to ignore? Like the safety equipment you refused to purchase because it wasn't cost-effective?" He moved to the central console where Zara was working. The screen displayed a schematic of the station's lower levels, with bright red indicators marking the locations of mining charges. 47 points of light, each one capable of carving through solid rock. "You know what's unavoidable, Director? Physics. When you detonate 47 plasma charges in a confined space, the resulting explosion doesn't care about corporate hierarchies or profit margins. It just destroys everything equally." The comm crackled again. "Mr. Voss, this is Captain Torres. I've reviewed your data package. If these allegations are accurate, they represent serious violations of corporate and federal law." "If?" Pike's voice was a low rumble of anger. "Captain, those aren't allegations. Those are facts, documented in the company's own records." "Even so," Torres continued, "vigilante justice serves no one. Stand down, and I give you my word that these matters will be investigated properly." Kale looked at his companions. Zara had finished her work on the mining charges and was now accessing environmental controls. Nyx continued monitoring external communications and security feeds. Pike had his hands deep in the reactor core's control matrix, his face illuminated by the blue glow of plasma conduits. "Captain," Kale said, "with respect, we've heard promises of investigation before. After every accident, every death, every safety violation that somehow got swept under the rug. The only difference is that this time, we're not waiting for justice to be delivered." He moved back to where Korath stood, still pressed against the viewport. Behind the director, the approaching security ship was growing larger, its running lights visible against the starfield. "We're delivering it ourselves." The observation deck fell silent, except for the hum of machinery and the soft clicking of keyboards. Through the viewport, asteroids continued their eternal dance, oblivious to the human drama unfolding in their midst. Korath finally found his voice. "You're making a mistake," he whispered. "The company will replace me. Someone else will take over operations. Nothing will change." "Maybe," Kale admitted, "but you won't be around to see it." He turned to address his companions. "Status report." Zara looked up from her console. "Mining charges are armed and ready. I can trigger them individually or all at once." "Reactor?" Pike straightened, his back popping audibly. "Feedback loop is primed. Once initiated, we'll have about 90 seconds before containment fails." "Communications?" Nyx gestured toward her array of screens. "All external channels are under our control. The security ship is maintaining position at 10,000 kilometers, but they're launching smaller craft. Boarding shuttles, probably." Kale nodded. "Time frame?" 15 minutes, maybe less." The comm system activated again, but this time the voice was different. Younger, uncertain. "Station Zerion 7. This is Lieutenant Rodriguez aboard the HMC Retribution. Mr. Voss, I read your files. My father worked in the Titan mines before he died. Company said it was a heart attack, but static filled the channel. In the background, voices could be heard arguing. Then the connection cut. Pike looked up from the reactor controls. Sounds like the good captain's having crew problems. Can't imagine why, Zara said dryly. It's not like we've given them a reason to question their orders. Nix's screens flickered with new data. Kale, I'm picking up internal communications from the security ship. The crew's divided. About half of them want to withdraw and report this up the chain of command. And the other half? Want to storm the station and end this quickly. Kale considered this. Through the viewport, he could see the bright flares of shuttle engines as the boarding craft approached. Each shuttle probably carried a squad of armed security personnel, trained for exactly this kind of situation. Director, he said, turning back to Korath. Last chance to say something meaningful to your employees. Korath's face twisted with rage and fear. You're criminals, terrorists. When this is over, your families will be blacklisted from every corporate job in the system. Our families? Kale's voice was dangerously quiet. Director, our families are already dead. Your company killed them, remember? That's why we're here. He moved to the communication panel. Captain Torres, this is Kale Voss. Your boarding shuttles need to maintain their distance. Mr. Voss, we cannot allow this situation to continue. Release Director Korath, and we can discuss. Captain, Kale interrupted, let me be very clear. We are past discussion. We are past negotiation. We are past the point where anyone gets to walk away from this. He looked around the observation deck one more time. His companions continued their work with the focused intensity of people who had made their peace with death. Outside, the boarding shuttles had stopped their approach, holding position just beyond the station's defensive perimeter. You asked what makes humans dangerous, Kale continued, speaking as much to Korath as to the captain. It's not our strength or our technology. It's our willingness to destroy ourselves if it means taking our enemies with us. He gestured toward the viewport, where the scarred asteroids drifted in their ancient dance. 30 years ago, humans came to this belt with nothing but determination and desperation. We carved homes out of rock and ice. We built a civilization in the void between worlds. Pike looked up from the reactor controls. 2 minutes to boarding range. And for 30 years, Kale continued, companies like Hegemony Mining have fed on that civilization. They've taken our labor, our lives, our futures. They've treated us like expendable resources. He turned to face Korath directly. But here's what you never understood, Director. When you make people expendable, you give them nothing left to lose. And humans with nothing left to lose are the most dangerous creatures in the universe. The comm crackled again. Mr. Voss, this is Captain Torres. I'm ordering my shuttles to withdraw. But I need your word that no harm will come to station personnel. Kale paused. Captain, how many people do you have aboard your ship? That's classified information. Humor me. A long silence. 340 crew members. And how many of them came from working families? How many of them understand what we're fighting for? Another pause. Miss Voss, that's not relevant to... It's completely relevant, Captain. Because right now, you're asking them to die for a man who spent his career treating human lives as acceptable losses. Through the viewport, the boarding shuttles were visible as bright points of light against the darkness. They had stopped their approach but remained in position, waiting for orders. Nix looked up from her screens. Kale, I'm intercepting communications from the shuttles. The crews are refusing orders. They're not advancing. Smart, Pike said. They know a suicide mission when they see one. Zara finished her work at the environmental controls. Life support systems are compromised throughout the residential sections. I can trigger emergency evacuation protocols, but it'll take time for people to reach the escape pods. Do it, Kale said. No one else needs to die for this. Alarms began wailing throughout the station. Emergency lights bathed the corridors in red as automated systems initiated evacuation procedures. Over the intercom, a recorded voice repeated instructions for reaching emergency escape pods. 23 minutes to evacuation completion, Zara reported. Korath stared at them in disbelief. You're letting them go? We're not monsters, Director, Kale said. We're just workers who've run out of patience. The comm system activated again. Station Xerion 7, this is Captain Torres. I'm reading emergency evacuation protocols. Are you releasing station personnel? We are, Captain. This fight isn't with them. Then stand down, Mr. Voss. Let us take Director Korath into protective custody and we can— No, Kale said firmly. Director Korath stays with us. He looked at the man in question, whose expensive suit was now wrinkled and stained with sweat. You've spent your career hiding behind corporate policies and legal protections. Today, you get to face the consequences of your decisions directly. Pike stood up from the reactor controls, his massive frame casting long shadows across the observation deck. Feedback loop is active. Once we trigger it, there's no going back. Evacuation progress, Kale asked. Nix consulted her screens. 60% complete. 15 minutes remaining. Through the viewport, they could see the bright flares of escape pods launching from various sections of the station. Each pod contained a dozen workers, their lives finally taking priority over corporate profits. Captain Torres, Kale said into the comm. I'm transmitting coordinates for the escape pods. They'll need immediate pickup. Understood, Mr. Voss. My shuttles are moving to intercept. The observation deck fell quiet again. Outside, the security ship's shuttles had abandoned their attack approach and were instead moving to recover evacuating workers. It was a strange ballet of rescue and destruction, played out against the backdrop of scarred asteroids and infinite space, and, you know, Zara said quietly, I never thought it would end like this. How did you think it would end? Pike asked. She shrugged, her cybernetic arm whirring softly. Retirement, maybe. A small pension. A quiet death in some company housing unit. Better this way, Nix said. At least we get to choose. Korath looked between them in growing panic. You're all insane. This won't change anything. The company will— The company will what? Kale interrupted. Hire more directors. Cover up more accidents. Kill more workers. He moved closer to Korath, who pressed himself harder against the viewport. Maybe. But they'll remember this day. Every time they make a decision that puts profits over people, they'll remember what happened to the man who went too far. The comm crackled once more. Mr. Voss, this is Captain Torres. All escape pods have been recovered. Station evacuation is complete. Thank you, Captain. Mr. Voss, is there anything I can say to change your mind? Kale looked around the observation deck one last time. His companions stood ready at their stations, their faces calm despite the magnitude of what they were about to do. Through the viewport, the stars looked down with ancient indifference. Captain, he said quietly, 30 years ago, this company promised jobs and opportunities to desperate people. They promised safety, fair wages, and a chance to build something meaningful in the void between worlds. He gestured toward the scarred asteroids floating beyond the glass. Instead, they built a machine that grinds up human lives and spits out profit margins. Today, we're putting a wrench in that machine. Pike's hand hovered over the reactor controls. Final status check. Mining charges armed and ready, Zara reported. All systems compromised. Nix added, no possibility of external override. Reactor feedback loop primed, Pike confirmed. Kale nodded. He turned to Korath one last time. Any last words, Director? Korath's mouth worked soundlessly for a moment. Then, in a voice barely above a whisper, my family. They don't know about any of this. Neither did ours, Kale replied. He moved to the central console and placed his hand on the primary activation switch. Captain Torres, this is Kale Voss. Tell them that humans remember. Tell them that when you push people past their breaking point, they don't just break. His finger hovered over the switch. Through the viewport, the security ship hung motionless against the starfield, its crew probably watching in fascination and horror. They explode. The switch clicked home. For a moment, nothing seemed to happen. The observation deck remained quiet, filled only with the soft hum of machinery and the whisper of recycled air. Then, deep in the station's core, something fundamental changed. The reactor's magnetic containment field fluctuated. Plasma that had been held in perfect suspension for decades suddenly found new pathways, new configurations. The feedback loop that Pike had created began to amplify itself, drawing more and more energy from the station's systems. Simultaneously, 47 mining charges detonated in perfect synchronization. The explosions tore through support structures that had been weakened by years of deferred maintenance. Bulkheads that should have contained the blasts instead crumpled like paper. On the observation deck, the four humans stood calmly as their world ended around them. The viewport cracked first, spiderweb fractures spreading across the reinforced glass. Then the floor began to buckle as structural supports failed throughout the station. "You know what the funny thing is?" Kale said, raising his voice to be heard over the growing roar of destruction. "They called us expendable." The reactor core breached. A column of superheated plasma erupted through 17 levels of decking, vaporizing everything in its path. The station's hull began to split along stress fractures that had been building for years. "But we're taking the most expensive thing they own with us." The viewport exploded outward in a shower of crystalline fragments. The observation deck, along with everything and everyone inside it, was consumed by the expanding fireball that had once been mining station Zerion 7. From the bridge of the HMC Retribution, Captain Torres watched in stunned silence as the station tore itself apart. The explosion was visible across the entire asteroid belt, a brief new star that outshone everything else in the void. "Captain," a communications officer said quietly, "we're receiving transmissions from mining stations throughout the sector. They all want to know what happened." Torres stared at the expanding cloud of debris that had once been a symbol of corporate power. "Tell them," she said finally, "tell them that some people would rather die than live on their knees." In the weeks that followed, the destruction of mining station Zerion 7 sent shockwaves through corporate boardrooms across the solar system. The data package that Kale Voss had transmitted was leaked to independent journalists, sparking investigations into industrial safety practices throughout human space. Director Thane Korath became a cautionary tale, his name synonymous with corporate negligence and the price of treating human lives as acceptable losses. The Hegemony Mining Consortium was forced to implement sweeping safety reforms and pay unprecedented compensation to the families of workers killed in accidents over the past decade. But perhaps most importantly, the story of 4 workers who chose to die rather than submit became a rallying cry for labor movements across the galaxy. Their names were carved into monuments on worlds they had never seen, honored by people they had never met. Because in the end, they had proven something that corporate executives and military commanders had always feared, that humans with nothing left to lose were indeed the most dangerous creatures in the universe, and the galaxy would never forget. Hey there, space traveler. I'm really curious about your thoughts on this video. Drop a quick comment and let me know what's on your mind. Or just say hi if you prefer. Either way, I'd love to hear from you. Oh, and one last thing. Every great survivor knows that to thrive in the void, taking care of yourself is key. So before you go, Check the pinned comment, trust me, it's important. And I've chosen another video for you to watch. Just click the card here or here if you want the whole playlist. See you there.